Is Aussie car culture dying? I've seen a lot of people talk in the last couple of years about how they think Aussie car culture is dying, and I've seen a bunch of different reasons given as to why they think this is. Stuff from police enforcement and laws making doing what we want to do with cars illegal, to toxicity and drama within the culture, even the cost of living, or maybe the introduction of EVs. And I think a lot of these ideas are kind of right in some ways, but also wrong in a lot of ways. I think that most people are kind of not seeing the forest for the trees. What I mean by that is that I think a lot of people are kind of getting bogged down with whatever kind of they see happening within their particular community, or maybe their area locally, or maybe just their own personal feelings as to why they're starting to lose their passion for the hobby of being into cars. And I kind of wanted to give my opinion on that in this video, and what I think is affecting Aussie car culture at the moment, and whether or not I think it is dying, or maybe it's not. This video is not scripted at all. Normally, I would have something up over there somewhere that basically at least has some bullet points for me to kind of follow along with and know what I'm supposed to be talking about. But today, I am just going to freeball it. I'm just going to freestyle it and see what happens. This might end up being a little bit long, a little bit ranty, I don't know. But if people like it, I might do more videos like this. If they don't, I will never do this again. But I kind of just wanted to get my thoughts out because for a couple of years, I've wanted to talk about it, but I just wasn't sure I had the right words or the right way to say it. And I figured, fuck it, I'll just put something out there about what I think and see what people think of that. When it comes to stuff like policing and legislation around modifying cars and stuff in general, I think there are some points to it that probably are affecting things negatively, but I was into cars when Campbell Newman was the Premier of Queensland, the last time we had a Liberal government. And for any of you who are in Queensland and dealt with that period and being into cars, that was probably the worst that we've ever had it in terms of crazy laws and way over the top police enforcement of, modified cars in our community. Like, it was so bad that it basically spawned a new political party that only ever got one member elected in Victoria, of all places, and then just fell over on its face immediately and failed. But it was so bad that people basically were like, let's create our own political party to try and defend our hobby and our interests. Like, this was the period where the government of the time made it so that police could defect cars that were on trailers, because people kept trailering their cars to track events or to meets and stuff, and the police were mad they couldn't defect cars that never touched public roads. This was a period where they changed laws so that you doing skids on your own property was now hooning instead of just whatever you were doing on your own property, which is the way it should be. Not to get too political about things, but a man's property, a man's land is his own to do with however he damn well pleases. Anyway, this was a period of massive police enforcement, and I gotta say, it was way more. There was way more going on with cars then than I feel like there is now. So, maybe in a way Aussie car culture is dying, but I don't think it's about policing and about legislation, because I remember back then, people just had the attitude of, well, there's more of us than there are of them. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing, and eventually either they're going to give up or they're going to get the message that they can't get rid of us. Like, at that point in time, every Thursday night, you knew that you could go out anywhere in Australia, go for a cruise, and you would find other car people out for a cruise as well. It just Thursday night, always, without fail. And then there was plenty of stuff happening Fridays, Saturdays, even Sundays, a couple of other times during the week, usually depending on where you were, but there was just always something going on. And it didn't matter about all this police enforcement. I think what happens is we kind of go through, like, it ebbs and flows. Like, we went through this period of really massive police enforcement, and then a new government got elected. They had different priorities, and over time, the enforcement kind of went down to focus on other stuff. And as a result, kind of the hooning and illegal stuff kind of went up a lot. Like, I've been to some of the skid meets around southeast Queensland, and at least a couple of years ago, it was out of control. Like hundreds of cars showing up to industrial estates, skids everywhere, fireworks going off, and the police would just show up with like one car, turn the lights on, clear everyone, just wait for everyone to clear out, and then they would just slowly follow along to wherever the next spot ended up being. They just follow a couple of cars to the next spot, do the same thing again and again. There was just they didn't bother trying. Whereas previously, you know, you would have 50 cars in a car park, people just hanging out, nothing's happened, and a half dozen police cars would show up, block all the entrances, exits to the car park, and then go through. You'd be standing there until 2, 3, 4 a.m. while they defected every single car that they possibly could. Now, I have heard a fair few people in Victoria, Melbourne especially, saying that exact thing is happening for them now. But I feel like what it is that we're now back in this period of high enforcement because things were just getting too much for the police to be allowed to ignore anymore, or allowing themselves to ignore anymore. They've gotten to the point where people were having too much fun, getting away with too much, and so now they're trying to crack down. They're trying to bring us back down again. And so we're going through this period of high enforcement, this flow, and eventually other priorities will come up and it'll ebb away. Like right now, basically every police force in Australia can't recruit enough cops, can't retain enough cops. Crime in some areas is up more than ever, and they've got all these other priorities to deal with. Eventually, the general public is going to get the shits with them enforcing car stuff and dealing with, you know, car meets and whatever, and they'll have to kind of let up, and it'll ebb away, and we'll have another period where we've got low enforcement. At least that's what I think will happen. So it's like policing and laws and stuff, you know, killing car culture. I think it's having an effect. It's certainly having an effect down in New South Wales and Victoria, but I don't think it's killing it off, because really, if you were actually passionate about cars, you'd just still do it anyway. You just deal with it. You'd find ways to work around things. You would just keep dealing, because that's what we did 15 years ago. That's just what we did. We just kept dealing with it and stuck with cars anyway, you know? And so I don't think that that's really killing things off. When it comes to like toxicity and drama, maybe there's a point there, maybe there's some points there, but I don't think it's in the way people think it is, because drama's always existed. It's always been part of the car community. It's been any community, because essentially that's what communities are. It's an us and a them. You're dividing us and them, and there's always going to be some level of drama between the us and the them, some level of toxicity or something, because that's fundamentally what community's about. That's how humans form these little sub-societies and cultures and whatever. It's always an us and a them. And then even within the broader car community, there's a whole heap more smaller breakdowns of communities of us and them. You know, you've got JDM, Euro, American, Aussie. You've got breakdowns within them of particular makes and models, Toyota groups, Nissan groups, Ford groups, Holden groups. You've got Falcons only, you've got Golfs only, Skylines, and then some of those subgroups go even deeper. Like I've seen groups that are dedicated just to FPV or HSV, you know, type of vehicle that absolutely does not deserve to act like it's better than its like brother and sister vehicles. Like we're talking about Falcons and Commodores that basically just have a different badge and a build number and a body kit for the most part, and they act like they are better than regular Falcons or Commodores. Like, it's just ridiculous. That's toxic. That's such a toxic attitude to have, that somehow your fake scarcity vehicle, that it's not a fucking Italian supercar, man. It's a family sedan that was mass manufactured by Ford or General Motors and then handed off to another company to do a little bit of extra stuff to it to make it just slightly different, but it's not really different. But you've got a build number. Like, that's so toxic. But that's always existed. This has always existed. Drama and toxicity, that's just always been a thing. It was a thing 5 years ago when all of the Instagram car girls were calling each other out publicly for sleeping with guys who weren't their boyfriends every time they were in different cities for events or photo shoots or whatever it might be. It was a thing 10 years ago when people were, you know, going off at each other over whose car was faster or slower, and getting into fights at power crews and stuff like that. It was a thing 50 years ago when our parents, or even older, grandparents maybe for some of you, were into cars and running from cops and doing all this stupid stuff that I've heard basically every boomer man tell me that they did when they were my age. But anyway, my point is, toxicity and drama, it's always been a thing. And what I see people always pointing at as the toxicity or drama that causes people to want to leave the car community in Australia is basically calling out other people on social media or talking shit about other people on social media. And yeah, okay, maybe that makes individuals not want to be part of it, but that doesn't make everyone else not want to be part of it. In fact, that, again, it's not good, but again, creates a sort of sense of community of people who will hate on certain people just because, and they all feel like it's an us and it's a them. Hey, it's all of us, the people who hate that guy or that girl, and it's all of them, the people who like them. The toxicity and the drama, I don't think that really makes people not want to be part of Aussie car culture. At least not that form of it. What I think it is people don't want to organize meets anymore. People don't want to make groups and organize meets, because inevitably when a group of people who organize meets gets popular enough, there will always be some sort of drama that basically tears the group apart. Sometimes rightly so. Like I've talked about some of these drama events on my Instagram and TikTok and whatever, and it can be really fascinating to see some of the bad behavior that people get up to. But I think overall, what kind of happens is a small group of people, maybe friends or, acquaintances, all kind of go, hey, I'd really like to organize some bigger car meets. I'd like to meet more car people. I really like cars. And they go, that's a good idea. Let's use this car park. And they start organizing events, and they get attention on social media, and more people come, and it grows and it grows. And it gets to the point where, hundreds of cars are showing up to every event. Maybe they start charging entry, $5, $10 entry, whatever, to park your car in the car park at the event. And then eventually, at some point, you get big enough and last for long enough that it becomes cool to hate on you and to talk shit about you and your events and the people who go to your events. And inevitably, it's found out that someone within that group who organizes things is wanted for war crimes in Nicaragua. And the whole thing will just tear itself apart every single time without fail. And that just happens again and again and again with every single group. And I mean, this is one of the reasons where, for a long time, for 10 plus years, I've openly stated that I just don't really like Facebook groups very much, because there always tends to be this infighting again and again that tears, you can start a Facebook car group, thousands of people join, and then a whole bunch of drama internally usually over some girl or somebody claiming that their car's faster than someone else's. That's the two most common ones I see. And inevitably a whole bunch of people take sides and the group just falls apart, and people stop participating in events, participating in the group. People don't want to be friends with each other or associate with each other anymore. And I think maybe that has a more serious impact on the broader Aussie car culture and community, because if people aren't organizing events and people aren't going to meets or cruises or whatever, then that has a pretty big impact. Because why would you really be into cars if you don't have, or a hobby in general, if you don't have anyone to share it with? Like every hobby, the kind of half the point is to share it with other people. Like even if you're just playing some competitive online multiplayer game and just screaming slurs down the mic at other people, that's sharing with someone else. That's not a great way of sharing, but it is. It's part of the culture of some of these games. And, any kind of hobby, people want to do it with other people. It's nice to go for drives late at night on your own sometimes, but it's way better to go for a drive with a dozen friends and get up to shenanigans during that drive. And so ultimately, when there are fewer and fewer meets and no one wants to organize any more meets because the drama that will inevitably come has kind of shut down anyone who wants to do that, I can see how that would negatively affect Aussie car culture. There's a whole bunch of people who talk about like people who create social media presences for a couple of different, like people who create accounts purely just to talk shit and be negative and get hate views, essentially. And people who essentially want to be influencers, essentially want to do sort of the same thing I do. And there are plenty of people who do it way bigger and better than I do. When it comes to people who are like toxic, like, you get these accounts out there who their whole shtick is just talking crap about everybody else, or about, being as general as possible, casting the widest net possible, trying to get rage bait, trying to like get rage comments and shares and all that. The easiest way to deal with those people is to just ignore them. Like, those people aren't really having an effect on the broader Aussie car culture. They're just building themselves a fan base through toxicity, and inevitably they'll kind of just disappear into obscurity. They do every time. They'll get popular for 5 minutes while everyone hates on them, and then they inevitably just disappear because everyone gets bored of it and ignores them. And just ignore them from the start, and they'll never get popular. There are people who obviously, they're part of their whole shtick is just trying to become an influencer, because everyone wants to be an influencer now, or a content creator, whatever you want to call it. And there are some people who claim that, well, there are so many people who are doing it who aren't even into cars. And I mean, so what? Kind of, it's kind of my opinion on that. Like, so what? If they're not actually into cars and their passion is actually just trying to be famous, a micro celebrity, essentially, how does that affect the broader car community? That's not killing Aussie car culture. That's just one person who's not as actually into the hobby as the rest of us are, maybe. I mean, I don't think it's really that big of a deal, but I've seen so many people bring it up as though it is a big deal. I don't know. I just think that's like kind of a complete nothing burger. When it comes to stuff like the cost of living and EVs, no, that's not a thing at all. I've seen a few people bring up EVs like somehow they're affecting Aussie car stuff. The idea that maybe someday our petrol-based vehicles will become illegal, maybe, like I could see it happening, maybe, but the politics and the science of all of this and climate stuff is not completely written in stone yet. I'm not a political channel, and I'm not going to say anything political, but there is so much push and pull broadly around the world around this sort of stuff, and the potential of, straight up, inhaling exhaust fumes is not pleasant. I'm just straight up. I do not, in my opinion, I do not like coming home at the end of a cruise smelling like burnt, extremely rich 98 fuel. It just is what it is. And so the push towards some sort of greener, like if every car just used E85 and that was considered acceptable because it's more environmentally friendly, I'd be fine with that. I'd be happy with that. The cost of E85 would surely go down, would surely plummet as fuel, as all of the industries pivot, all the fuel industries, oil industries pivot to making only E85. Like, that's what I'm kind of driving at here, is that there are potential pathways that are being really heavily researched and explored for more kind of less environmentally impactful fuels. So we might end up going in that direction a lot more than EVs necessarily. I'm not going to get into any of the whatever people want to argue over the ups and downs of EVs. That's not what I do. I don't do politics here on this channel. But I think overall, I don't think EVs and the potential of ICE vehicles being banned is that high of a thing. I think it's a possibility, but I don't think that's killing Aussie car culture right now. I don't think anyone looking at getting into cars now, or buying another car or a second or a third project car or whatever right now, is thinking so much about something that's going to happen in 2050. I just don't think it's a thing. Now, the cost of living and the cost of secondhand cars. Oh, those are probably some of the most legit reasons. But like with any other hobby, I think it just will temper people's ability to participate or what they're willing to do. Like, people will live at home with their parents as long as they can. I wish I could live at home with my parents. I'd be saving an absolute fortune and not paying someone else's mortgage. It'd be great. But I think a lot of younger people will keep doing that. and still be able to participate in the hobby in a pretty reasonable way. There'll be a lot of people who, have to divert their funds to more important stuff that isn't a hobby, that isn't cars. And so we might see the community kind of contract, or participation, or what people do kind of slow down a bit. I think overall, especially people who aren't, massively financially backed, who are younger, who aren't in that position where they can spend lots of money, we'll probably see a lot more of them sticking or stuck with base cars, with the cheapest mods possible for a long time. This whole thing of showing up to car meets and going, all the regular traffic, this is what counts as mods to these people, and it's just body kits or wraps or suspension or wheels or whatever. Like, I think that's the stuff that's going to become way, way, way more common, because it's the only stuff people can afford to do. No one can afford to do a 1,000 horsepower build in every single vehicle. Like, it's just not, I know I can't. I just know it's not reasonable. So overall cost of living, I feel like, will have an impact, maybe, but I don't think it's killing Aussie car culture. I think what it will do is slow a lot of people's participation down, or what a lot of people do, it'll slow them down. But when you look at something like track events, when you look at something like the events that are happening at facilities, at tracks, it feels like it's bigger than ever. Like, actually, a lot of events are beginning to have extra days, because the participation has been so high that they can afford to have the facilities for longer. There are more events being added than ever before. Like, you look at Queensland Raceway, for example. Granted, there's a big push to make that a more used, better facility, which is fantastic. But the number of events that are happening just there and that one track has increased a lot in the last couple of years since it was bought. Some other tracks just around Southeast Queensland, or some other facilities around Southeast Queensland, have also seen larger participation than ever before. And I think what this shows is that people are more willing than ever to take it off the streets and get onto tracks and into events, and willing to spend that money to be able to just push the limits of their cars and their driving ability more than ever. The events that are happening at tracks and stuff are bigger than ever. I don't think you can look at anything like that and say that broadly Aussie car culture is dying, because that's just bigger than it ever has been before. I don't think Aussie car culture is dying so much. I think the problem with Aussie car culture is that we have a PR problem. I've said it before, but I'll say it again because I think it's important. We don't have a hooning problem. We have a PR problem, because the average Aussie does not understand our hobby. In fact, the average Aussie just doesn't have a hobby. I mean, most people, they get up in the morning, they go to work, they come home, eat dinner, scroll social media, watch Netflix, get mad at whatever the news tells them to get mad about, and then they go to sleep. And they just do that day after day after day. And when they look at people like us who tear cars apart, do all kinds of mods to them or crazy stuff to them, put them back together, and then drive them as dangerously and quickly as we possibly can, they're confused by this hobby. A lot of them are just scared of this hobby. They don't understand it. And so when the general population, their opinion of us starts at not understanding us or confused by us or straight up scared or not liking our hobby, then we're already in a bad place. We need better PR. I mean, you as a car guy, think about how you feel about cyclists. How do you feel about that hobby? It's kind of the same thing. You look at these guys, why are you wearing Lycra? Why are you spending all that money on that toy? This is a thing that kids ride around, that teenagers ride around. Why are you riding on the road? Why are you four abreast blocking me when I'm trying to drive quickly on this fun Pacific Road mountain twisty pass? Like, piss off, get out of my way. I don't get you. I hate you. That's what the average Aussie feels about us, because they don't get our hobby either. And we need to be doing some positive PR to fix that. Here's a neat little trick that the media uses. And once I point this out, you're going to see it everywhere, every time they ever talk about Aussie car culture. What they do is the story can be negative, it can be neutral, it can be positive, but they will always mention hooning or some sort of illegal activities involving cars. Every single time. Like, I mean, the story could be that car club organizes a cruise and raises $1 million for children with cancer. And somewhere in that story, every time without fail, usually towards the end, because that way it creates this like recency bias and it's the thing that people retain, they will bring up hooning. They'll bring up hooning, whether or not everyone behaved themselves and there was any hooning at the event, or they'll mention some other, hooning or illegal activity related thing. Or one of the things that they love to do is drag the organizers in front of the camera and force them to basically denounce hooning on camera, even though the event has nothing to do with hooning or illegal activity. Because what they're doing is creating an association for the average Aussie who just isn't into this hobby at all. They're creating an association between car culture and cars and hooning and illegal activity. Even when the story is supposed to be positive overall, right at the end there, they'll make sure that they put something about hooning or illegal activity in there so that way, over time, as story after story after story, whether they're negative, neutral, or positive, that association is always being made to the average person. And then in the back of their mind, no matter what, they always have this negative association. Even if all you ever saw was positive stories about Aussie car culture, there would still be that association in the back of your mind. Oh yeah, hoons. And so as a result, they've taken that already neutral or kind of confused opinion, like I was talking about, maybe even outright scared or disliking us kind of opinion that I mentioned earlier, and they're then bringing it down even further constantly, not just with negative stories of people doing the wrong thing, but by associating even people doing the right thing with doing the wrong thing. So it doesn't matter how much of a goody two-shoes you are, always doing the right thing on your best behavior, little boy, always following all the modification laws, always driving the speed limit on the street and making sure you tell the police that you're having a meet at some car park and all that sort of nonsense I've seen people do. It doesn't matter because that's not positively affecting the public's perception of car culture because they don't know that you're doing it. They don't care that you're doing it. Like, that's kind of just the baseline, and all that they see is negative press, and any positive press still has that negative association, bringing their opinion of us down every single time. So what we need is somebody or someone's, preferably multiple people, who can create a positive association, do good PR, improve our public relations. But unfortunately, the most well-known people who are peripherally related to, like, who are part of Aussie car culture are like millionaires who are complete dickheads that generally the average Aussie sees them as like scumbags who sell hopes and dreams or scam people. I can't name names or go much further because they're litigious people who will potentially try and sue me, but I'm sure you guys can guess who I'm talking about. Like, it's not a good association to have. That's not creating any positive. In fact, they kind of thrive on negative press. These guys kind of thrive on negative. They intentionally do stunts to get negative press, to get attention. Like, they're not creating a positive association between car culture and the average person. Then the next best thing we've got is like other large influencers that don't have the broader public knowledge of them, but might have, millions, hundreds of thousands, millions of followers on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, whatever it may be. But the problem again is that usually people get that big by showing a whole bunch of illegal stuff or stuff that the average person isn't gonna like. Like, Spotto and crew, I love them and I love what they do. But let's be honest here, we don't really want a whole bunch of videos of cars with massive flames and a guy in a green balaclava screaming at chimneys being plastered all over the front page and people's feeds constantly as the pinnacle, the poster boy of Aussie car culture. Like, kind of is, because of the size they've gotten to, and that's what they're doing. And we all like it, but for the average person, oh, why are you doing that? Well, why do you like that? Like, they don't get it. They don't get it. It's not their thing. It's not their hobby. And so we're stuck in this problem where basically almost all the other hobbies have a whole bunch of positive press, and we kind of don't have anything because I don't know, we don't have anyone out there who's got the influence, got the capability, who's able to create that kind of positive press in front of enough people, positive spin in front of enough people. Is Aussie car culture dying, in my opinion? I don't really think so. I think that we're in a period of uncertainty, but the future looks positive. The aftermarket industry keeps growing every year. It increases by millions of dollars in value every year. More performance workshops open up every year. Track events are getting bigger and bigger. More days are being added, larger participant numbers than ever before. And I think all it will take for people's perception internally of the Aussie car culture, dying or getting better or whatever, I think all it will take to change it is for more meets to start happening. For more people to be willing to kind of step up, deal with the toxicity that does come with the territory, admittedly, and just organize meets and do meets. I think once that happens, people's perception will change a lot, because overall, I think Aussie car culture is doing just as well, if not better than ever. It's just about how we perceive ourselves and each other, and about how we change the public's perception of us more broadly to make this a more acceptable hobby to the average person. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed my rambling. I think most people probably wouldn't and didn't, but I kind of just felt I needed to say something because I've been thinking about it for too long and couldn't really come up with a scripted video that I felt like makes any sense, because none of this makes any sense. I just keep going in circles. But anyway, I'll see you guys in the next video.